As you will have seen in Geneva, the special envoy for Syria, Stephane de Mistura, spoke to reporters at the UN headquarters there. And he warned of what he called a possible, quote, perfect storm in Idlib due to the potential military escalation in the area. Mr. de Mistura stressed that 2.9 million lives are at stake in Idlib, which is the largest of the so-called de-escalation areas. Mr. de Mistura cautioned that although discussions are taking place to avoid a worst-case scenario, miscalculations could occur, leading to unforeseen escalations. He also echoed the Secretary General's own statement from yesterday, underlining the use of chemical weapons would be totally unacceptable. The Special Envoy said there is a need to maintain moral pressure to not hurry with a drastic military option and allow more time for sustainable formula that could be linked to fighting terrorism, but also to save civilians. And our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the number of suspected cholera cases in Yemen has been increasing over the last 2 months. Since April 2017, more than 1.1 million suspected cholera cases and 2,310 associated deaths have been reported across Yemen. The outbreak is the most serious on record. Between the beginning of the year and mid-August 2018, 120,000 suspected cases have been reported. Although this figure is lower than during the same period last year, the increasing rate of infection over the recent weeks is raising concerns of a possible third wave of the epidemic, with the current rains increasing the risk of spread. Humanitarian partners are working to avoid large-scale resurgence. This month, our partners vaccinated nearly 400,000 people against cholera in high-risk district of Hodeida and Idlib. This followed earlier campaign in Aden in May, when nearly 275,000 people were vaccinated against cholera. Our partners will also continue to support critical water, sanitation, hygiene, and health facilities. Supplies to treat over 500,000 cases have been pre-positioned in warehouses and health offices in at-risk district. And the Deputy Secretary General, Mina Mohammed, just concluded her visit to Copenhagen in Denmark, where she met with several senior government officials, including the Minister of Foreign Trade and the Minister of Development Cooperation. Discussion focused on Denmark's support for the 2030 agenda, on climate action, multilateralism, and the ongoing reform of these United Nations. Ms. Mohammed also met with Crown Princess Mary, whom she thanked for her advocacy on behalf of women and girls, and discussed key actions needed to advance Sustainable Development Goal 5. She also visited the UN city in Copenhagen, where she held a town hall with all staff. Finally, the Deputy Secretary General delivered a lecture at the University of Copenhagen, focusing on today's global challenges. And the Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator Ursula Mueller continued her visit to Mali today, visiting Mopti in the central area of the country. Currently, 972,000 people need protection and humanitarian assistance in Mopti, the highest proportion of people in need in the country. Humanitarian needs have increased there due to intercommunal violence and various attacks by armed groups. In Bankas, Ms. Mueller met with internally displaced people, hearing about their desperate need for food, water, and shelter. And the number of internally displaced people in the country has sharply increased since the beginning of the year to over 75,000 by the end of July. In Mopti alone, the number of displaced increased from 2,000 to 12,000 from April to July. Ms. Mueller also met with representatives of aid organizations to better understand the challenges they face in providing life-saving protection assistance, with local authorities stressing the need to scale up conflict resolution, access to basic social services, and protection. Also in Mali, the head of the peacekeeping department, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, will be heading there, starting a visit tomorrow. During his time in Mali, he will be in Bamako, as well to the north of the country. He will meet with the UN staff in the peacekeeping mission, as well as officials from the government of Mali and others involved in the Malian peace agreement. He will also hold discussions with the G5 Sahel leadership to discuss the UN's support for this joint force. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the World Food Programme and its partners are providing emergency food aid to Ebola victims in North Kivu province. Before the declaration of the outbreak at the beginning of the month, WFP had already been assisting 12,000 displaced people who had been forced to move due to conflict. And they are now expanding their operations to provide food in hospitals, treating those affected by the epidemic and their families. Some 4,000 people are receiving a 1-month supply of cereals, beans, oil, salt, and that's to reinforce the response to critically ill patients. WFP is also airlifting high-energy biscuits into Goma from their warehouse in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And this morning, the Security Council extended the mandate of the panel of experts on Mali. That was followed by an open meeting on Guinea-Bissau. Addressing the Council, Jose Villegas Fillo, the Secretary General Special Representative and head of the UN Peacebuilding Office in Guinea-Bissau, said the political and security situation had remained relatively calm in recent months. He noted that authorities and political actors have focused on preparations for legislative elections in November. The envoy said the consolidation of long-term stability remains contingent on the successful holding of legislative elections, urging international partners to maintain and increase their political, technical, and financial support. In the afternoon, the Council will meet on the extension of the mandate of UNIFIL, the interim force in southern Lebanon, and that will be followed by consultations on sanctions on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, as well as other matters. And today is the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. Enforced disappearances has frequently been used as a strategy to spread terror in a society. It often targets human rights defenders and those who are vulnerable, like children and people with disabilities. The day to raise awareness on this issue, which has become a global problem and is not restricted to any specific region. And we are sad to announce the passing yesterday of Mr. Andrew Hughes of Australia, who was the UN's police advisor from 2007 to 2009. Mr. Hughes headed the police division with a high level of integrity, dedication, professionalism, strong leadership, and he will be missed by friends and colleagues. And we send our condolences to his family. And we do expect the President of the Security Council for the month of August, Ms. Karen Pierce of the United Kingdom, to speak to you at the stakeout of the Security Council of the United Nations after they're done this morning. Tfaddali.
Thank you, Stephane. Stephane, should there be an attack or counterattack to a potential chemical incident in Syria by any state legitimate by UN standard? I mean, any attack trying to punish the Syrian authorities or the Syrian army for a possible chemical attack, would it be legitimate by UN?
There is no
law?
reason, no excuse for any use of chemical weapons. Full stop.
Okay. But in this case, there are many players on the ground, and there are a lot of reports talking about chemical weapons being brought into Syria through Turkey. And in the past, there were 2 kilograms of sarin, which were imported from Libya.
I've read, I've read press reports. We have no confirmation of the veracity of those reports. But the UN's position, the Secretary General's position, is unambiguous. Chemical weapons must not be used. Full stop.
The case of retaliation as a result of that without investigation.
I don't, I'm not a native English speaker, but I'm going to try to be as clear as possible. Chemical weapons must not be used. Yes.
Thank you, Stephane. About Idlib and the declaration by Mr. de Mistura, one of the several preoccupations that particularly European countries have is that the offensive could produce a new wave of refugees toward Europe. As far as you know, is there any discussion, preparation going on inside the UN system to prevent that?
Look, it's our main concern, the Secretary General's concern, Mr. de Mistura's concern, Mr. Lowcock's concern, the UN system's concern is for the safety and well-being of civilians. We have warned that a military action in Idlib province could have catastrophic humanitarian implications. There are 2.9 million civilians in the area. I think over 2 million of these people are already getting or in need of humanitarian aid. All the parties involved have a responsibility to protect civilians under international humanitarian law, under international law. They must all do what we can. I think Mr. de Mistura very echoed the Secretary General's statement from yesterday. He raised the alarm on, I think, in very clear terms on the situation in Idlib. We understand there are all sorts of discussions going on, and we hope, we very much hope that that everything can be done to avoid more humanitarian suffering. Errol.
Thank you, Steph. In the light of Mr. de Mistura's statement in Geneva, how the Secretary General sees the role of Turkey, obviously, when it comes to Idlib? Did anybody reach to any Turkish official or talk on that issue? And I will have another question.
I think the Secretary General yesterday was very clear in his call on the Astana guarantors to step up their efforts to find a peaceful solution to the situation in Idlib. Contacts have been had at various levels. Mr. de Mistura is constantly on the phone on the issue of Syria as a whole.
Turkish as well.
Astana includes Turkey. He is in touch with all the parties.
Go ahead.
Sorry if I missed that because I was not regular on the briefing. Whether the SG is going to attend the funeral for the late Kofi?
Yes.
And also, you want to follow?
No.
Also, I'm asking this late one on my own, not a representative of the media organization or so, but a long-term journalist here. I'm receiving emails of Mr. Matthew Lee. He's complaining how the UN handled his situation. Is his case finally? No, I'm just asking.
No, I know you're just asking. This issue has been asked and answered. I would encourage you to either read the transcript or to look at the videos, even of I think yesterday or the day before.
Okay.
The issue is settled as far as we're concerned.
Okay.
When was it? Hold on. If we could let this young lady who has not yet asked a question, then we'll come back to you with
Hi,
Nizar.
thank you. As UNGA is fast approaching and Trump will be coming to us once again, I was wondering, there's been some speculation that perhaps he could use his speech to set out the long-awaited Middle East peace plan. Can you say anything to the SG's hopes for that, if that were to happen,
no, I mean,
or
we
expectations?
very much look forward to having the President of the United States here as the leader of the president of our host country. We'll have to wait and see what he says. I'm not going to speculate on the speech of a head of state, but obviously the Secretary General has been in touch with senior members of the U.S. administration in various discussions on the issue of the Middle East, and I think we do await to see the plan. Okay. Yes, Nizar, come back to you. With pleasure, as I mentioned.
Mr. Guterres has appealed to the guarantors, Astana guarantors, regarding the situation in Idlib. However, does he appeal to the P3, United States, Britain, and France, who have threatened to use force in Syria to restrain from using force against or carry out any attack in Syria?
I will reread his own words from yesterday, that the Secretary General urgently appeals to the government of Syria and all parties to exercise restraint and to prioritize the protection of civilians. That our message for the protection of civilians, the protection of civilian lives, the protection of civilian infrastructure goes to the parties on the ground and to all those who also have influence over those in the ground. And that list is quite long.
Well, do you have any information regarding the kidnapping of children and women in order to stage another chemical attack in Idlib, as alleged by the Syrian and the Russian authorities?
I do not. Yes.
Steph, starting in September, 2 women from Latin America are going to be holding 2 of the main positions in the UN structure. Does the SG have any comment on the significance of this for women and for the region?
Well, I mean, they were the best candidates for their jobs. I think the Secretary General has made it a priority and has successfully reached parity and beyond in terms of the senior leadership of the United Nations over positions that he can himself appoint. It's very important that the senior leadership has a broad reflection of the geographic balance of the United Nations, and we look forward to having them on board. Errol, yalla.
Thank you. What is the position of the new High Commissioner of Refugees on the Rohingya issues? Again, if I miss it, especially in the light of the yesterday meeting, when we heard so many very strong statements.
We have one High Commissioner at a time. Right now it is Zaid Rad Al Hussein. I think he has made his position on the Rohingyas very clear, as has the Secretary General. I don't know what Madame Bachelet's personal position is. I don't speak for her in a personal capacity. We'll have to wait till she comes on board and is sworn in.
Yeah. Do you now have the list of those who were invited to Geneva for the Yemen talks?
The Houthis and the government of Yemen, the two main parties that were invited. Okay, thank you all. Tomorrow is Friday. We shall be here, but we will not be here on Monday.